You're back with The Nation, and welcome to Brian Edwards and Bill Ralston, our media panel. This week, Labour leader David Shearer gave a stand-up press conference after the Labour caucus, addressing that extraordinary issue, the man ban. Let's have a look.
Well, you know, as I say, we have a democratic party here. I mean, I don't go running in and shut things down.
But that's what you've done. That's what you've done.
But it's important to say that the distraction that we've had over the last few days.
And this is David Shearer speaking with me on First Line on Wednesday morning.
Look, I don't put my my hard ass on the line and show it, but believe me, behind the scenes I am.
Right. Well, there we go. That was Wednesday morning in an interview on First Line. Bill Ralston and Brian Edwards. Bill, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, you know, he is not hard-assed. That's the problem. And, you know, he's trying to pretend to be something. Also, I mean, basic media 101. He brought into the interviewer's pejorative question line by repeating the word hard-ass, which you had asked him in the first place. Secondly, that first clip, he's just babble. He's into babble. You know, he's not going in messaged up. He's not saying what he's supposed to be saying. And he's lost his confidence, and that's the crucial thing, I think, in media. You've got to be confident, you've got to sound confident, you've got to look confident, and then you come across in a more positive way. And he's in this kind of death spiral. I don't know who's media training him, Brian, but
I don't know who's media training him.
It's not me. But whoever's media training him really needs to get on the job, because this guy is going out the back door.
What advice would you give him, Brian?
Oh, I might keep that to myself, actually. Why should I tell you that? I'm not being paid to do that. Actually, I think a lot of his problem has to do with his delivery. I mean, it's very difficult for him. If you watch his interviews, particularly long interviews, he'll go along pretty happily, and then he sort of seems to lose concentration, and then he's flummoxing around, and then he gets back in again. And I think one of the things that his problems is that the public looks at this and they think, well, you know, what's wrong with this man, you know? And that, to me, is really his problem. I don't agree with you about him putting forward his agenda. I think his problem, in a sense, is that he puts it forward too often. So that he's asked about something and he comes out with these 2 or 3 things which he says are the Labour Party's principles that they want to bring in. And after a while, you realise you've heard it before, and you heard it before that, and you heard it before that in all different interviews. So I think he needs some wider set of answers that he can deliver, rather than these 2 or 3.
I think he's off message, and the whole Labour Party's off message. They need to get back to the core issues that actually won them in the past. And I mean, you know, housing, for example, I think is a really strong message they should be pushing, and we're not hearing it. Instead, they're prattling on about pokies and GCSB, nothing that appeals to their core constituency.
I get the feeling from, you know, when David Shearer was first interviewed in the early days, and he was very confident, and you know, he could speak about a lot of humanitarian issues and his background on the UN, and he was much more fluent, I think. He strikes me as someone who may have lost his confidence in an interview situation. How does someone get...
Well, he's listening to that little voice on the back of his head, and he's constantly amending everything he should be saying to try and change the sense of it, because I think he's trying to learn a script when he goes out. And really all he needs is mental bullet points. I want to talk about housing, I want to talk about health, you know?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what he's doing, actually. That's my whole point. He does that all the time. And, you know, we're very media savvy in New Zealand, and people notice if someone is doing the same thing all the time, which seems to me what you're recommending. I think he should be doing something quite different. The other thing I think you need to say is, I can't remember a politician who's been battered around the head quite so much by certain segments of the media. Not the print media. The print media, it seems to me, have been very reasonable in their dealings with Shearer and what they said about him. But the television journalists, I think, have been very unreasonable. I think there's a bloodlust there, which is now showing, and everybody wants to be in at the kill, and they want to be in at the kill first.
He's trailing blood in the water. That's why the bloodlust is up. And the media in the Parliament has always worked as a pack.
The interview during the week, you know, the hard-ass interview, as it were, you know, we put it to him that, you know, everyone says he's a lovely guy, top bloke, and there is always this but attached to his leadership, that he doesn't come across as hard-ass. Now, Winston Peters will pick up a baseball bat and just smack the media around, whereas David Shearer doesn't do that. Would he benefit in any way about coming across as being a bit angrier?
No, I think you're expecting him to be something that he isn't. I mean, he is a conciliator. His background is a conciliator. He's not the sort of guy who's going to get stuck in and be a pit bull and attack people. That's simply not in his nature to do that. And I'm not really sure that we need someone like that. I'll tell you an interesting thing is to look back at Helen Clark. Helen Clark was 12 years in Parliament before she became leader of the opposition, right? She'd also been a cabinet minister. She had a wide experience. She also had a team with her. Her office crew, including Heather Simpson, was a very strong, supportive group. One of the things we're seeing at the moment is Shearer missing out on things that should have been picked up for him by the people in his office. That's just not happening. And if you look, by the time it was 1996, I think, Helen Clark, see, we're writing off David Shearer now, Helen Clark was in 5% in the polls, Labour was in 14% in the polls, everybody said she was a goner. Then she ended up having 3 terms in office. So I don't think you can write him off yet.
There was an inner steel that I don't sense is there with David Shearer. If we get 3 more polls, I think showing Labour under 30%, he's toast. And
I agree.
If we go back to that Duncan,
I agree with you.
If we go back to the Duncan Garner story, where he tweeted that he'd heard that the roll was on. Journalists, believe it or not, don't make things up. Someone in the Labour caucus and someone close to the Labour Party actually whispered in his ear about that. So here's the other problem Shearer faces.
We actually know what that is about, because that happened on this programme. Yep. That happened on the day after the by-election, when Paddy Gower did an interview with him, and Paddy Gower, in that interview, cites all those same things that Duncan Garner was arguing with Clayton Cosgrove about on that amazing interview that he did. So that happened here. That's where Garner got that.
But what I'm saying is, in that caucus, there are people out to destabilise Shearer because it's in their interest to do so. And that, as long as that continues, that kind of disloyalty is there, Shearer
absolutely. Well, that brings you back to the confidence, doesn't it? Because if you look at, say, National, and it's always, the big united front, Labour, the devil comes from within. And someone told me the other day that, a Labour MP's biggest enemy is probably a Labour MP. and if you don't have the support of your house, and your group of people, then surely that affects your confidence.
Where is it that you see this missing support? I'm not sure where you see this missing support.
Well, the fact that people are leaking to journalists about his leadership is the destabilising factor.
We may be talking about one person leaking.
Well, there's lots of factions within Labour, though, isn't there? Yeah. Come on, that's the reality, and there's all little moving forces.
I mean, we're surely not going to defend Duncan Garner for what he said there. You can't defend that, because it turned out to be absolutely untrue. Every aspect of that, what he said, turned out to be absolutely untrue. And I'm a huge admirer of Duncan Garner.
Somebody told him an untruth then in that case, and he reported that by tweeting. I mean, this is a weird thing, by the way. Twitter is now reported.
It is a beast. It is a beast.
But Twitter has now become reported. And the way that so many Labour MPs came out instantly on Twitter to dump on him and to defend Shearer. Again, one, it's interesting they have to do it on Twitter. Secondly, that much Twitter traffic from Labour MPs simply upped the ante on the whole thing.
Well,
that's why, I mean, to me, this doesn't have as much to do with leadership as it has to do with management. It's a management issue to me, and the management that ought to be coming from his office, and I guess ought to be coming from him as well, is not there. So it's the missing management to me is a major issue in all of this.
Management and leadership are the same thing.
And that comes back to...
I don't think he's got a good team around him.
That's the thing, doesn't it? That comes back to David Shearer, surely can only be as good as his weakest link in that small team, can't he?
Well, maybe he needs to find a new management team. Maybe that's a possibility. I have no idea.
OK. The other thing that Duncan Garner did do on Radio Live, and I think it's still on their website, he explained the nature of a coup and how it comes about. And he said the first thing that when someone says there's a coup on, a journalist says, then everyone comes out and attacks the credibility of that journalist and denies. And that is what has occurred. There was a rounding, everyone was on message, and everyone came out. Annette King, Chris Hipkins, everybody did go on message. So, he's got some experience with coups, hasn't he?
They do deny, and I mean, that's just natural. If you look at what happened in Australia there, Rudd never announced he was going to run and was in fact denying that he would run up till 2 hours prior to the actual coup occurring.
Yeah, but it's a rock and a hard place, isn't it? If you don't deny it, it's a bad story. If you do deny it's a bad story, that's what you're saying here, really. So it's very, very difficult.
I just want to have a little look at that cartoon that you have there.
Because I think he's got a very rough deal from the media, particularly the ego-driven television journalists. Jane Clifton, whom I'm a huge admirer of, has this cartoon. This isn't the very latest Listener. It shows the political commentators. They're in a truck there, or in a van behind, and it says, and David Shearer's in the front in a very little car for some bizarre reason. This is a little red one. This is a slaying cartoon. And they're saying, our policy pursuit until the perp crashes. And I think that's a very accurate statement of what's happening at the moment, that the television media in particular have focused on him. They're out to get him. So I think he's entitled to say, be fair with me.
OK, he's had enough. All right, Brian Edwards, Bill Ralston, thank you.